We have financial trainer and QM Financial CEO, Ligwina Hananto, with us connected. So let's say hi to Ligwina. Hi, how are you?
Hello, Kai. Hello, Yani.
Hi.
Long time no see. It has been a while. Well, straight off to the elephant in the room. In your opinion, which do you prefer
Yes.
when it comes to a house? To buy
I'd
or
like
to
to
rent?
pick up from the last footage. Yeah, I'd like to
Okay.
pick up from the last footage. It was mentioned that both renting and purchasing a home requires steady income. So the question will be, how long can we maintain this steady income? Of course, I am biased here because I've had my experience renting a house and I have my experience buying a house, but I'm biased because I prefer to finally purchase a home, and I think I've done it not just a house but property wise. I've done it 4 times. So because I'm leaning towards that, it may not be fair to say I prefer to buy. So I'm trying to be neutral here. We're trying to be neutral to accommodate those who are not willing to buy a house and those who are willing to buy a house, or in this case a property. Let's consider that last statement requires steady income. How long can we maintain this kind of income? It's not going to be forever.
Right.
One way or another, every single one of us will face pension period. And at that period, where are we going to be living? If you don't buy a house in your younger age, it means you may have to continue renting when you are older, while you have no more income as strong as while you were younger. I think that's the major issue that we need to address if we want to stay renting a house.
Well, it's actually very interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so you have to have a steady income. And let's say that we choose to purchase a house. How much do we need to prepare?
I made some calculations, and this will vary in different areas and the kind of income you receive. But you can say the property you can own can be 30 to 60 times your average monthly salary. That's the calculation at the moment. So if you want to buy a house that is 300 million, your income will be around 10 million. So if you want to buy something around 1 billion rupiah or 3 billion rupiah, then your income needs to be much higher than that. I'm not saying it's the only way, but this is like a general calculation when we consider having a down payment and then the ability to pay the installment from the mortgage. I'm going a bit technical here.
30 to 60 times, yeah?
30 to 60 times of your monthly income together, join as a couple on an average.
Okay, that's an interesting way to formalize this particular calculation. Okay, so many young people these days are buying subsidized houses that are located further away
Yes.
from the city, right? What is your opinion about this? Were they wise enough and fully informed before making this decision?
Whether they're fully informed, I don't know. But the most important thing that we need to also consider, and this is what a lot of people who are renting are very concerned, is once you sign the mortgage paper, you are bind to it for a very long time, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And so not a lot of people are comfortable with the idea of committing to loan installment to the bank for the next period of your adult life. That's why when you're talking about subsidized loan, this is very particular because you need to be able to afford the installment.
Yep.
Subsidized loan is usually for people whose income is between 4 to 7 million. 4 million if it's buying a house, 7 million and above, 7 million maximum if you're buying a rusun, a small building apartment. In this particular case, that means the down payment is usually discounted or almost zero, and the interest rate is also subsidized, so the amount of installment can be very low. This is a program from the central government that allows more people access to purchasing a house. But it's still the same thing. Whether you're somebody who is starting out and buying your first house using subsidized loan, or you're someone who's more stable, the same rule still applies. Can you afford it? Which means you need to calculate the down payment, which is usually between 10 to 30% of the house, and whether you can pay for the loan installment, which in my opinion should be less than 30% of your income.
Okay, so that's very interesting, because then you'd have the question, because now a lot of developers, a lot of programs saying like zero down payment,
Yeah.
and in billboards, and it's actually very attractive to young people who are always thinking about, how
Yes.
am I just supposed to put together the down payment? It's not necessarily, young people, it's not necessarily about the loan itself, the installment itself that they worry about, but it's
Yes.
actually the most daunting part is having to really accumulate or really save up that down payment.
And,
because
and
that is a lot.
the idea to save that kind of money in a very
Yeah.
short time
Yeah.
is rather daunting. That's right.
All right. So let's say we have decided to purchase a house. Now let's make a list. So tell us the advantage and disadvantage of purchasing a house.
The advantage is the house, the property value can be stated in your balance sheet. So you have a personal balance sheet. Your personal balance sheet will have the list of your assets and the list of your credits. And in your assets, you can put down your house right there. How much is your house value at the moment? And then in the liability section, you can also write down how much is your mortgage. That's why you get to put them down. If you are renting a house, the asset and the liability is still zero. All you have
that's
is just
true.
money going out of your budget.
It's an
So
expense.
that's the number one, I think, which is valuable. So in time, in 10 or 15 years, the value of the property tend to increase, while the amount of your loan will tend to decrease in time,
Yep.
in the long run. The second one is, it was mentioned before, it brings stability. Where you want to go, you know there's a place you call home and you are grounded there. Psychologically, I think the behavior of people will also have more focus, because now you need to make sure you work to pay for that loan.
Yeah.
That's the positive side, or some people think that's a negative side. A third one, I think, it's a place that you can stay with for eternity if you start your pension years. You don't need, I'm not saying eternity, but you don't need to worry about where
Yeah.
you want to live when you don't make as much money as you do. That's the positive side of purchasing a house. Let's talk about negative. So I can stay neutral to those who are opposed to buying a house and prefer to rent. Again, it's a big commitment. It means that you're committed to it for a long time. For a lot of people who are still, how do you say, nomads about where they want to live, buying a house is a hassle,
Yeah, yeah.
For example, if you work in a company that you have to move every 2 years, buying a house will mean you have to pay for something that you're not going to be living there.
Yep.
That's one thing. And the second part is about having your money pushed into paying mortgage. There's interest and fees and all that you have to pay. Well, you maybe prefer to use that money for leisure. So it means whatever you choose, whether you want to rent or actually start buying a house, most people will use mortgage. You need to consider what kind of lifestyle you are in, and you need to consider the way you make money and the way you manage your money. Because I believe whatever the choice people make, the way we make money and the way we use our money will determine whether renting or purchasing a house is more suitable for you.
Wow, that's actually an eye-opener. That's right. That's really true. But Ligwina, out of curiosity, right? This is despite of renting, disadvantages of renting. We already sort of compared the two, right? So because it really depends on your priorities, and everybody's perspectives is different depending on the need as well, and our ability to pay those mortgages. But some people, really use houses as investment, right? Because it is actually, if you buy more than one, there is a possibility where it actually can be a return and actually a possible further income if you have more than one. Now, now this is just out of curiosity, because there are people who leverage the other house to finance the other mortgage, if you get what I mean. So you actually you have two houses, you finance one, and the other you rent out, and then it's like financing each other. Is that even possible?
If only it's that easy. It sounds beautiful, doesn't it? It doesn't always work like that. Okay.
Okay.
I think we hear so much stories about people who are successful in property investment. Let's remember that what works for me may not work for other people,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
what works for the property gurus may not be working for normal people.
Yeah.
So a lot of these stories that I've read are usually done overseas, for example, in the United States or in Australia and New Zealand. For that particular case in Australia and New Zealand, what I read is the interest rate are so low and they have tax break. So if you buy a house and you renovate it and it's not rented out yet,
Yeah.
nobody's renting that house, you get tax break. We don't have that kind of privilege here. So
Ah.
the way we want to do the property business may not be suitable. I once did a calculation. If you want to do something like that, then your down payment needs to be pretty high, up to 50%. Because at that time when I calculate that, our interest rate was pretty high, more than 9%. Now it's actually pretty low, so I need to recalculate that. But even if you want to be able to do that, please consider when the house or the apartment or whatever property you have as an investment is not being rented out, and there's no guarantee a property will be rented out all the time, you still have to pay for that mortgage,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Don't miss paying that mortgage, because if you miss paying that mortgage, you may lose your house. And therefore, this kind of leverage is very high risk,
Yeah.
because once that property is not rented out, you don't have that income to pay for the mortgage. So before anything, before you want to do into any scheme, make sure your income, your personal income, together with your spouse, can fund the loan installment for your particular property, whether you have other income or not.
I see. All right, so many people say that renting a house is better than buying because it will reduce costs. Do you think this is true? Enlighten us.
In some cases, yes. Okay, I've done it myself.
When is it not?
When we were much younger, I did a long time ago, before we could afford paying mortgage.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Everybody has their own stages, right?
Yeah.
So at this point, if I rent a house, it will be more costly for me. But when we were much younger, just starting out, we don't have the money for down payment. It didn't make sense for us to purchase a property.
Yeah.
So that sentence is not wrong. But the question is, how long can that sentence be true? Because our life is different, right?
Yeah.
So my personal experience, we went through a stage where we could only afford to pay rent, and then as the family grew and we had a little boy, and then we wanted to rent a bigger house, then I had that calculation that renting the size of the house that we want is more costly than paying the loan installment of the house about the similar size. And that's when we finally made a different decision, stop renting and start purchasing a house. So that statement is not wrong, but the question is, how long will it stay true?
I see.
Very interesting, Sri. So, just out of curiosity, to make the calculations right, just to compare the different calculations right. So we've already compared lots of different, pros and cons. Talk to us about the cost calculations. What if a person wants to rent? What are the costs that we have to prepare? Because sometimes even renting, we have to pay like a down payment for an entire year. There's rarely a renting that we can can pay for every month, just like like residential residential rooms, and compared to also costs that we need to prepare when we want to buy a house. Could you just enlighten us just for a
Yes.
picture?
The nature of renting a property in our country, most of the time it's for longer term. And I'm talking about 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and so on. Even for commercial property, for a restaurant, for example, it's rare to have a property that can be rent out monthly payment. So when you're paying for rents, you need to consider you need the money up front. So it's not 1 million per month, but it's 12 million upfront. There is less regulation about property here, I have not found, correct me if I'm wrong, I have not found people who want to rent will have to pay for bonds. If you look at how the regulation for renting a property overseas, there's a rule about bonds. So with bonds, for example, you need to pay up 3 months to 6 months worth of rental payment, and that will be put somewhere. So if you leave the property and it's broken down, that bond money will be used to repair it. So this does not happen in a lot of cases that I see in Indonesia. Maybe in some places, but most of the time it doesn't. And I think the most difficult part would be when the landlord can just cut you off. So consider the cost of moving. You need to be able to have like an emergency fund just in case you get kicked out, because there's no regulation that says you can stay there. The landlord can just kick you out anytime you want, and you have very little bargaining power. That's with renting. Maintenance of the property may not be cost so much, because most of the time the landlord will have to pay for maintenance. For if you break anything, you may have to pay for it. But with purchasing a house, you will have to do all the work. And anybody who's a homeowner knows that every day there's something broken in your property that you have to go through and you have to repair. And maybe that's why people think renting a house is cheaper or cost you less than buying a property, because you see so many, you don't see the hidden cost with renting an apartment.
Wait,
or
I just heard a cat. So one of the consequences is you may or may not be allowed to have a cat in a rental house. I have
Join
two.
the conversation because he lives here rent free.
That's right. Okay, so let's get this straight. If a person decides to add more assets, is it better to buy a new house or buy land or build a house? And how about the price comparison between the two choices? So, in your opinion, which one is better?
Okay, I'm not a property guru, so I'm not gonna pretend that I know so much about it, but let's use some common sense here. The land is what the value will be. So if you're buying a land, again, location of the land will determine demand and supply of this particular land. For example, if it's inside the city, so the paper of your land, the deeds, has the logo of Monas on it, it tends to have a value that will not be bloated. You know, there tends to be, I'm not saying all the time, but there tends to be less bubble compared to if you buy in the surrounding satellite cities. So when you buy a property, this is a tip I get from a rental agent, from property agent, and I think everybody should know this tip. If you buy a property, check out the rental value of that property in the surrounding area. It's usually around 7 to 12% per year. And this is very important because, for example, if an apartment is valued at 2 billion rupiah, then the rental value should not be far away from 200 million per year. Now, we found a lot of cases buying a property for 2 billion rupiah in the satellite city, and then the rental value is much less than that.
Wow, that's
It's
a big
like
markup.
40 million per year. That is an indication of bubble. So to answer that question, which one should we buy? It really not about which one, but it really more about what kind of demand and supply is available in that particular area. Because one area may not be inside the city, but there's a huge demand because there's a big factory being built there, then there's going to be demand for workers looking for a house for rent, for example. So that's the kind of thing we need to look at. It's a very common logic to follow when you're in a business. You need to be able to satisfy your buyers. So in this case, who are your buyers? Do you want to resell this property or do you want to rent it out? That's your buyer. So let's follow their demand and we supply, and that's how you do it.
Oh, well. So, Ligwina, thank you so
Does that
much.
make sense?
It makes
Yes.
sense, so much sense. And I hope we'll have more time to talk to you again because, when it comes to investments
Definitely.
and
No
money,
problem.
we feel like everybody needs to learn something new every single day.
Yes.
Thank you, Ligwina, for joining us this afternoon.